They looked like the picture of happiness, a family full of laughter, music, and love. On television, the Partridge Family seemed perfect. But behind all the smiles and bright colors was a hidden story of emotional struggle. While millions of fans were enjoying the show, one of its stars, Susan Dey, was quietly suffering. She wasn't trying to separate herself from the group because of pride, but because of pain. In 1970, Susan Dey was just 17 years old when she was cast as Laurie Partridge. She had very little acting experience and was mainly known as a model. Still, her natural beauty and charm made her an instant star. Her role as Laurie won the hearts of audiences across the country. Viewers loved her fresh face and sweet personality. Teen girls admired her, parents approved of her, and her fame exploded. Her face was on magazine covers and posters everywhere, and the show's songs climbed the music charts. The whole country seemed to fall in love with her. But while the world saw a cheerful, ideal daughter, the truth about Susan's personal life was very different. Fame came fast, and so did pressure. From fans, from the media, and from herself. While Susan looked confident on the outside, she was privately struggling with the weight of always having to be perfect. Behind the scenes, the set of the Partridge Family wasn't always as joyful as it appeared. The young cast was under constant stress. They were teenagers, still trying to figure out who they were, while being watched and judged by millions. David Cassidy, who played her brother Keith Partridge, was the show's breakout star. Over the years, he said the cast got along like family and had no major problems. He even spoke fondly of Susan. But there were emotional challenges that couldn't be ignored. Susan had to grow up in front of cameras, and it wasn't easy. She later said that despite being close to her co-stars, the fame often made it hard to truly connect with people. The stress and constant attention began to create emotional distance between her and others, including David. At first, Susan and David had a strong bond. They shared laughs and private moments behind the scenes. But as their fame grew, so did the space between them. Susan was quiet and thoughtful. David was outgoing and charming. Their personalities clashed at times, and Susan found herself feeling more and more disconnected. Even though their characters were close siblings on screen, behind the scenes there were moments of frustration and unspoken feelings. Susan eventually developed deeper feelings for David. These weren't just friendly or sisterly, they were romantic. Her emotions grew slowly and quietly, but deeply. David, however, didn't feel the same way. He knew how famous he was, and he was careful not to get involved in anything that could affect the public image of the show. He admitted later that he purposely kept his distance from Susan, knowing that any real-life romance might be misunderstood or cause problems. For Susan, this quiet rejection was painful. She never spoke openly about it at the time, but those emotions stayed with her. While she kept smiling for cameras and playing the role of Laurie, she was carrying the weight of unreturned love and confusion. She never got closure, and it hurt. That unspoken heartbreak stayed buried for years, even as she moved on with her life and career. Eventually, Susan distanced herself from the Partridge Family. She even refused to take part in reunion projects. Many fans were surprised and wondered why. But for Susan, being part of those events would mean reopening old emotional wounds, especially when it came to David Cassidy. Her decision wasn't out of hate or anger, it was about protecting herself from pain she had never fully healed from. Though Susan Dey will always be remembered as the sweet, talented girl from the Partridge Family, her real story is much deeper. She was a young woman who faced the pressures of fame, battled with her identity, and experienced the quiet heartbreak of unrequited love, all while the world was watching. As time went on and the Partridge Family became just a memory of classic television, its cast began moving on with their lives and careers. Susan Dey, who had played the sweet and responsible Laurie Partridge, worked hard to leave that chapter behind. She wanted to be taken seriously as an actress, not just remembered for a teen sitcom. Susan focused on more serious roles in both television and movies, choosing projects that showed her range and depth as a performer. She no longer wanted to be in the shadow of Laurie Partridge, and she succeeded in building a respected name for herself. David Cassidy, on the other hand, never truly escaped his past. No matter how hard he tried, his image as a teen idol stuck with him. He continued to be linked to his early fame, and though he took on new projects, he also struggled with personal challenges. In 2007, he published an autobiography titled Could It Be Forever, where he opened up about his life during and after the Partridge Family. The book included stories about fans, fame, and his time on the show. But there was one confession that caught everyone's attention. David revealed that during their time on the show, he and Susan Dey had spent the night together. He didn't share many details, and the moment was described vaguely. But to readers, and to Susan, it was a shock. What seemed like a small detail in a book was, for her, a deeply personal memory. She had never spoken about it publicly. David's decision to share it without her permission felt like a betrayal. Susan had spent years trying to separate herself from her Partridge Family days, including the emotions and heartache tied to her younger self. After all that effort, having that private experience exposed to the world, without warning, was painful. It wasn't shared as an apology or a thoughtful reflection, but rather as a dramatic moment meant to add flavor to his memoir. For Susan, it was more than just a story. It was a wound reopened. She didn't respond publicly to David's revelation. She gave no interviews, made no statements, and didn't try to correct what was written. But her silence spoke volumes. From that point on, it became clear that she no longer considered him a friend. Her absence from reunions and refusal to speak about him or the show made it obvious. A line had been crossed, and there was no going back. The trust that had once existed between them was broken. After the Partridge Family ended in 1974, Susan stood at a major turning point. While the public still saw her as Laurie, she was determined to create a new identity. She didn't want to be trapped by her past or typecast as the sweet teenage girl forever. Her big break came in the 1980s when she landed the role of Grace Van Owen on the hit legal drama LA Law. Playing a strong, smart, and complex attorney was a huge shift from her previous roles. Susan's performance earned her a Golden Globe and serious respect in Hollywood. She had successfully reinvented herself. In the 1990s, nostalgia for the Partridge Family was at its peak. TV networks and fan groups pushed hard for a reunion. VH1 wanted a special, and ABC talked about doing a one-time comeback episode. Fans flooded forums and fan clubs asking to see their favorite TV family together again. Most of the original cast expressed some interest, but Susan remained silent. No interviews. No public statements. No social media reflections. She didn't even hint at a possible return. Her silence stood out, especially when everyone else seemed open to the idea. While other stars were willing to revisit the past and take part in the wave of nostalgia, Susan clearly chose not to. She had moved on, not just professionally, but emotionally. For her, the Partridge Family wasn't just a fun show from her youth. It was also a time of personal struggle and emotional pain. Returning to that chapter, especially after David's public revelation, was something she simply couldn't do. In the end, Susan Dey chose to protect her peace and focus on the life and career she had built after the show. While fans may have missed seeing her take part in reunions, her decision reflected strength and self-respect. She refused to let her past define her, even if that meant stepping away from the spotlight when the world hoped she'd return. This deeply emotional and reflective narrative captures more than just a story about fame, nostalgia, and celebrity drama. It reveals a raw, very human truth about boundaries, betrayal, and healing. Susan Dey's journey, as outlined here, isn't simply about avoiding a television reunion. It's about reclaiming autonomy in the wake of a personal violation. David Cassidy's public revelation, something he may have seen as harmless or even endearing, cut much deeper than surface-level gossip. It exposed a part of Susan that she had never consented to share, turning a private, vulnerable moment into public spectacle. And unlike the staged scripts of their youth, this wasn't fiction, it was real. Her refusal to engage after that, including her silence at the time of Cassidy's death, wasn't out of cruelty or bitterness. It was self-protection. Susan Dey chose a different path from many of her peers. While others found comfort in revisiting old roles, She walked away from the illusion of harmony because, for her, the past wasn't just about fanfare and laughter. It was also about being silenced, misunderstood, and finally, exposed. In a world that often expects women to forgive, forget, and perform grace under pressure, she chose instead to draw a firm boundary. And that choice, quiet as it was, spoke louder than any public statement ever could. To answer your closing reflection, yes, betrayal, especially of something private, can feel like a kind of theft. When a secret is shared without consent, it strips away your agency, often leaving you exposed and powerless in the eyes of others. On a public scale, the pain and humiliation can be magnified beyond comprehension. Anyone who has experienced something similar might resonate deeply with Susan's decision to protect what little of herself was still hers to keep.